Ed Sealover, senior reporter with the Denver Business Journal. Welcome back on the Business Break.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan.
Always great to have you, Ed. The legislature has just adjourned for the session. Property tax cuts, fentanyl and crime, tax windfall for small businesses. What are the headlines?
Well, I think the headline is the business is still trying to figure out what this session is going to mean. There are some big business bills here, most notably the $600 million that's getting pumped into the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, a SALT parity bill that's going to create some tax windfalls. But businesses are looking at the bullets that they dodged, the idea that there's no sexual harassment rewrite this session, that there's no major bills to kind of push employers to get people out of cars. And they're trying to figure out what this whole fentanyl public safety legislation means. Is this actually going to do anything? Is this going to make business leaders feel safe enough to bring their workers back downtown? I think that has still to play out.
Okay, so let's dive a little bit deeper. How do you see some of the impacts of both the legislation that's been passed this session, as well as those, as you say, bullets that perhaps weren't shot or that were missed this session?
One of the maybe most impactful bills, I would say easily the most impactful bill, the $600 million that was put into the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. The way that's going to affect business is in what they won't see. This could get the state online to pay off its billion-dollar federal loan that's kept the Unemployment Insurance Fund floating by June 30th. They can do that. Businesses will actually pay a notch lower in terms of their rates next year. It will push off the solvency surcharge for at least a year till 2024. That's another big fee that businesses won't have to pay. And they definitely won't have to pay, or they won't lose their Federal Unemployment Tax Act credit, which is $21 a worker because this passed. So the biggest thing is that businesses who are still going to have to carry the burden on their back of refilling the fund that pays out unemployment benefits are not going to have to pay as much or carry as much of a burden on that one. The SALT Parity Act is the other one I think that could be very impactful for businesses. This is an act that basically says instead of LLCs and S corporations and other small pass-through entities paying their taxes on an individual level, as the partners in such businesses do now, they can pay it on an entity level and be able, in doing that, to take the federal credit against state and local taxes that was wiped out for pass-through entities in the 2017 Tax Reform Act. This is a bill that anywhere could have an impact of anywhere from $315 million to $1.75 billion are the estimates, because what it lets them do is go back to the years 2018 to 2021 and retroactively get those tax credits. That's a lot of money that can go into the economy at a time when businesses are facing uber inflation and they're facing labor shortages. So I think those are the two you look at right away. The property tax bill that you mentioned too is another one that's going to impact businesses. This is going to change the property tax structure for 2023. It's going to knock 30,000 off the value of any assessed non-residential property, and it's going to bump down the assessment rate from roughly 29% to roughly 27.5%. That's going to save an estimate of about $1,200 per business. So those are the three things that I think are going to hit business the most in the pocketbook coming out of this session.
No doubt. And of course, you mentioned the fentanyl, the crime issues kind of continuing to persist or be an issue. Any way you can expand on kind of the latest on that?
Well, yes and no. I mean, yes, you can expand on it, and that the legislature, the very last thing it did in this session was to pass a bill that is going to criminalize 1 gram or more of fentanyl possession, and it's going to make it a little bit easier to prosecute people who have that fentanyl on them as dealers rather than as just users needing help. But there's still a lot of debate whether it's going to give DAs what they need to do. How this applies to business is, I think that the best way you can look at it is look at all the businesses along the 16th Street Mall here in downtown Denver that are still empty, that have not brought their workers back. It's no longer because of coronavirus concerns. There are business leaders who say, my workers don't want to come back. They are scared because the drug problem has led to so much open drug use and so much crime downtown that they don't want to be there. Is this a bill that's going to make people feel confident enough that crime is going to go down and they can bring their workers back? I don't know. That's a big step to take for this. There were several other bills that are going to create some grants for police departments to hire more folks and do some other things. But I think the jury is really still out over whether the legislature accomplished its goal of making Colorado a safer place to live in and to do business in.
No doubt, crime and the whole fentanyl debate and issue are big issues for Coloradans in general, but obviously for the business community, as you said, Ed, the ability to attract and retain and keep workers and people who want to work in some of these areas throughout downtown or the central business district. I know that's a big issue. I keep hearing it from a lot of folks I talk to. All right, here's a question for you. Now, you cover this stuff all day, every day. Any surprises?
Yeah, the biggest surprises were what didn't happen this year. Business geared up at the start of the session to really fight a couple of bills. One, they expected there was going to be, by mandate or heavy incentive, some effort to get for employers to get workers out of single occupancy vehicles and find a different way for them to commute. That didn't happen. That went to an incentive laden bill, went to its first committee and got slaughtered. And I think that really, after the Poles administration had to pull its proposed mandate to do this last summer, I think it really takes this issue off the table. And so I think maybe businesses are a little surprised, hey, that's not a fight we're going to have to have. Another fight they expected to have was for the expected reintroduction of what is called the Power Act, Protecting Our Workers' Rights Act. And the main thing that bill, which died very close to the end of the 2021 session, would have done is redefine sexual harassment and sexual discrimination in a way that would really open up to a lot more workers being able to sue their companies for actions that were taken against them. However, there was no consensus on that bill. And what was introduced was a very, very eviscerated bill that takes a couple of protections, like, adding domestic workers to the list of people who can claim discrimination. The businesses basically say has no impact on them now. So that was a surprise that didn't have to fight. The third thing that may have been the surprise that didn't come up was the major environmental regulation bill. Now, there were a ton of those that went through, and particularly if you work in a factory that emits any kind of chemicals emissions, you're going to face some new regulations going forward because of a bill called House Bill 1244. But there was what oil and gas executives called an extinction level event bill that was passed around near the end of the session, a draft bill that would have put on regulations that could have shut down some of those facilities across the state. That didn't come about. And I think businesses not only were surprised, but maybe breathed a sigh of relief that the oil and gas regulations issue didn't come up again this year. So if you're looking for surprises, it's not what came, it's what didn't come, or at least didn't stay long in the legislative talks this year.
As always, Ed Sealover with the Denver Business Journal. Thanks for keeping us up to date on what's happening. Thanks again for coming on the Business Brief.
Thanks for letting me talk about these important topics.